Hi, I'm Erik Patten. I'm here to tell you about my show, Significations of Culture, the Shared Experience. This work really started back in kind of 2006, 2007, when I became interested in other artists and photographers who were really kind of doing object portraits rather than traditional still lifes. Maybe one object delicately lit, against a dark or obscure background. People like Edward Weston, people like Hiroshi Sugimoto, even the painter Morandi. But really, I was more interested in examining new things and contemporary cultural trends rather than anachronistic ideas and kind of romanticized versions of things. And so I really started to look around for things that could be a subject in that context, and I became interested in stuff that was inherently poor quality, right? The things you find in the dollar store, the things you find in kind of the junk aisle they have in lots of bigger, nicer stores now. And these things were interesting to me because they were made of bad materials. They often had sort of poorly applied paint, but at the same time they were very interesting objects. They were very aesthetically pleasing from a sculptural sense, and because they were full of little flaws and errors, everyone had a unique quality to it. Certainly my little toy cars were a starting point for that work. And over time, I think that developed, away from an interest in the material, which is still very important to me, and more into an interest in the symbolic nature of the things, in questioning kind of why we make things that look like other things, why we make little symbolic representations of stuff, and kind of what meaning was tied up in these incredibly cheap, incredibly kind of poor quality objects, right? In a way, they're sort of copies of copies of copies, and a lot of their kind of inherent meaning is lost. And I think in other sorts of things, you would have more of like an object kind of fetish. Like that is, you buy an iPhone. An iPhone is a kind of a perversion of the idea of a phone in a way. Like if anybody's old enough to remember using, what was historically the phone, the iPhone is so far from that, but yet it's so sleek and perfect and smooth, and so there's, in a way, it's a thing that can be beloved for what it is rather than what it's supposed to be, which is a phone, right? Now, politically speaking, these things can be incredibly fascinating and even horrifying. There are racial and gender relationships on display that seem way out of step with where culture is now, or maybe not out of step enough. I don't know. So for me, it works on a lot of levels. I like people to think about what they think the thing is, what memories, what ideas it conjures for them, but then also to be confronted with the physical reality of the thing, right? To believe in the story of the astronaut that they have conjured in their mind, but then also to be confronted with kind of how bad the thing is, how poorly painted it is, how, distressed or scratched up it is, right? So, in a way, photographs are always illusions. We look at a picture and we're transported mentally into that space, into that time, right? What I like is pictures that confront that and challenge that, and in my work, I try to make it, especially in the later work, like the trees with the fog and the kind of fall tree with the sky. I'm interested in exploring a boundary between illusion and just pure reality or pure material. So, when you look at those pictures, are you kind of lost in the fantasy of it, or are you confronted by what's in it, you know, seeing the plastic, seeing the torn paper, seeing the, you know, seeing the things, the literal things that are put in the picture. So, you know, in my mind, you can degrade the elements of an image quite far, and people still, they kind of buy the fantasy of it. We have a strong disposition to buy the fantasy of an image. Now, the other big thread to my work, of course, is the plastic packaging, right? This stuff it's trash, right? I mean, it just holds something, and then it's, you know, used for a time, it annoys people, it's hard to cut open, and then it gets thrown away. But it itself is quite beautiful, and then it has these very rounded forms, and it becomes a kind of, you know, obfuscated symbolic metaphor for the thing that it held, right? Some stuff like the packaging of the toy guns looks very much like the object that was in it, right? And other bits of packaging, you'd be at a loss to figure out what was in that to begin with, right? But it all still remains as a symbolic kind of tracer of the thing that it held, right? And similar to the toys, I think it's a space for the viewer to put something in there, right? You see the packaging from the gun, and you can imagine the gun that goes in that, right? But you probably don't imagine the gun that actually went in it. I mean, you have no idea. So what you mentally put in that thing says a lot about you, right? Says a lot about the history and culture you bring to looking at the picture. And I don't know that any viewer will kind of think of these things, you know, intellectually, but I hope that sort of subconsciously, you know, this is what's happening, right? And all of these things are very disposable. The toys are very disposable, the plastic packaging is very disposable, and ultimately imagery has become very disposable. You know, you get on Instagram and you flip and you flip and you flip through pictures, and, you know, you maybe look at something for a few seconds and then it's gone, right? So we've made imagery, we've made art functionally highly disposable, and so there's a kinship between the subject and the nature of the work, you know, that, again, I hope is kind of, you know, I hope that when people look at the work, they find it humorous enough, they find it entertaining enough that they, you know, they want to look at it, that they enjoy it, but that they find it deep enough or even confusing enough that they hang on it, right? That they're left to look at it and think about it for a while and not just immediately move on to the next image. You know, I like the idea of pictures that play off of a type, that play off of, say, traditional landscape or play off traditional still life, but then break that mold, because you have to break the mold in order for people to be left to really think about your work. You know, there's a lot of work on the internet now that looks like a million other people's work, and these strong types you know, become so easy to dismiss. And in a way, they're appreciated, but they're also dismissed. You might take a picture and it gets a million likes, but nobody actually looked at that thing for more than a few seconds, you know. So it's sort of appreciation without understanding, maybe, and it certainly devalues the work. So, you know, I hope that my work kind of penetrates that on a certain level and leaves people to really look at it and to really think about it.